Back to order with the singing of our national anthem. Wondering if we could have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous council meeting. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 7, presentations, petitions, and delegations. So tonight we're honored to have our previous council members attend tonight. We're going to honor them for their public service. Amongst the 7 members of council, there is 85 years of council experience amongst this members. So we wish to thank them for their public service. We know each and every one of them loves this town. They work diligently to improve this town over the many years that they represented the residents of Orangeville. So we'd like to deliver a short bio of each of our former council members, and Deputy Mayor McIntosh is going to help me with the presentation of some plaques and letters to each of our former council members. So if each council member could come up when their name is called to our station here, I will read some bio. So Mr. Wilson, Scott Wilson, if you could step to the podium, please. So Scott Wilson was first elected to council in 2006. He was re-elected in 2010 and 2014, and over his 12 years of service as a councillor here in Orangeville, looked over Parks and Recreation, were some of his portfolios, and economic development, planning, and innovation. He was a member of our BIA board, strong supporter of our libraries, and also a member of the Greater Dufferin Area Chamber of Commerce, representing council. He participated in many committees, including the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee, Recreation Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, and the Orangeville Seniors and Age-Friendly Community Committee. Other accomplishments that Mr. Wilson was involved with was the important purchase of the Diane Drive property from the Upper Grand District School Board, which has now grown into the beautiful Lions Sports Park that we know and love. Scott also was involved in the purchases of active living playground equipment. He oversaw some major renovations at our Mill Street Library, including the library fireplace and the Storyland area, and also was important regarding the designation by the World Health Organization of Orangeville as an age-friendly community. So Mr. Wilson has many years of municipal affairs experience in his job as the CAO of the County of Wellington, and this town council and the residents of Orangeville wish to thank him for his many years of service. Scott, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Mr. Don Kidd. Don You know, I mentioned 85 years of service. I think Dawn has participated in about, what, 75 years here of attendance at council meetings? I know many, many years, Dawn, so thank you for your last 4 years of service to the town as a councillor, but I know you were involved in many, many council meetings previous as a resident, and gave your thoughts on many topics prior to being elected. Don served 4 years as councillor. His portfolio during his time here was the Parks and Recreation portfolio. Don was also instrumental in the Lions Sports Park and the completion of that, and I know that Don's very proud of the work that the town did, and the town staff, and Don helped to oversee that. Don also spent time on the Orangeville Theatre Board, and committees that he was involved with include Events Committee, the Recreation Committee, and the Snow Clearing Committee. And Don, we want to thank you again as council members here for your years of service to this community, and thank you very much. Sylvia Bradley. Sylvia was first elected to council in 2006, was re-elected in 2010, and again in 2014. During her 12 years as a councillor, she oversaw finance and administration and also public works portfolios. She was a member of the library board and also Hills of Headwaters Tourism Association. She served on many committees, including the Citizens Commission on Finance, the Trailway Committee, First Night Committee, the Orangeville Sustainable Action Team, the Olympic Torch Relay Community Task Force, the Honors Committee, Property Standards Committee, the Heritage Orangeville and Heritage District Facade Committee, the Arts and Culture Committee, the Sign Development Review Committee, and the Transit Committee. Some of her important accomplishments include the start of the Baby Tree Program. How many trees over the 12 years, Sylvia?
More than 12,000.
Is that right? Fantastic. The community garden, the new sign bylaw, and many partnerships on environmental projects in our community. The start of the sustainability plan, which we're now seeing morph into a sustainable neighborhood action plan, which we're working on now. And she gave out many, many environmental awards. So I think we have to thank Sylvia for bringing environmental concerns to the forefront here in Orangeville. I know she worked tirelessly on that, and that she loves our town, and we thank her very much for her years of service. Thank you, Sylvia. Warren Maycock. Warren was elected first to council in 2003. He was then elected deputy mayor in 2006 and served in that function for the election of 2010, won again, and again in 2014. So he was 12 years as a councillor and 3 years as a deputy mayor, excuse me, and 3 years as a councillor. During Warren's time, he served as a Parks and Recreation portfolio manager as a councillor. Warren was also a member of Dufferin County Council for 12 years and also was elected by Dufferin County Council to the position of Warden of Dufferin County in 2011 and 2015. Warren served on the Library Board, the Police Service Board, and the Orangeville Hydro Board. He also served on the Committee of Adjustment, and I was fortunate to spend time on the Committee of Adjustment with Warren and our Deputy Clerk, Susan Lankite, back about 20 years ago. Warren also served on a Feline Committee in 2004, the First Night Committee, the Mayor's Environmental Advisory Committee, the Property Standards Committee, Recreation Committee, Heritage Orangeville and Heritage District Facade Committee, and the Honors Committee. So Warren, I want to thank you for your 15 years of service to our town, and I know, like I've said before, all of the members of council who were feting tonight love this town and continue to do volunteer work, and we want to thank you very much, Warren, for all your time and efforts. Thank you. Gail Campbell. Gail is our longest-serving former council, being first elected to council in 1997. She was re-elected again in 2000, 2003, 2006, 2010, 2014, and most recently was elected as an Upper Grand District School Board trustee in 2018. She spent 21 years as a councilor, and some of the boards that she served on include the Youth Center Board, the Library Board, the Police Services Board, Credit Valley Conservation Board for 21 years in a row, I believe, Gail. BIA Board, Headwaters County Tourism Association, the Greater Dufferin Area Chamber of Commerce, the Theatre Board, and Executive Committee of the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities for several years. She also served on the Committee of Adjustment, the Recreation Committee, Heritage Orangeville and Downtown Heritage District Facade Committee, Trailway Committee, the Fire Service Advisory Committee, Sports and Cultural Events Funding Committee, the Animal Shelter Committee, the Feline Committee, the ODSS Glen Forest Walkway Task Force, Economic Development, and the Accessibility Committee since 2002 when the committee was started. Her biggest accomplishments are all the actions that have been taking over to make Orangeville accessible. Gail has been the community champion for a barrier-free community here in Orangeville, and I think all of those who are challenged by mobility issues and those who are in the seniors community must thank Gail for all her tireless work in that regard. So, Gail, thank you so much for all the service for this town.
As the oldest person here, may I please say a few words?
Yes, of course.
I'd like to say thank you, of course, to council, but thank you is just such an adequate word for what I feel for the people of Orangeville. You've trusted me for 21 years to serve as a councilor, and I've always tried my very best to serve you with dignity and respect. And I just really want to thank our town staff. Over all the years, you work so hard for Orangeville, and it really shows. So thank you. We're starting to appreciate your time to say thank you to everyone who I've been involved with. It has truly been an honor for me.
Great. Thank you very much, Gail. Two of our former council members were not able to make it tonight, but I did want to read some of their accomplishments and honor them as well. Nick Garisto, after a few years of absence from council, was elected again in 2014. He served 4 years as councillor. Previous to his election in 2014, he had served 6 years as a councillor and 3 years as deputy mayor. Under the time during the 2014 to 2018 council session, he oversaw finance and administration. He also sat on the BIA board. He also sat on Economic Development Committee, Property Standards, Transit Committee, Communities in Bloom, and I know was very proud of the project at the East Entrance Flagpole and Beautification Committee. I know that he held that dear to his heart. All other accomplishments, every year the town has improved on the Communities in Bloom, with last year receiving a 5 Bloom Silver with special mention for the Friendship Gardens at Headwaters Healthcare. Also, Nick was involved in implementing the transit optimization study and the implementing of the new modern transit fleet. So I want to take this time to thank Nick for all of his years of service to this town. So Nick Garisto, thank you. And finally, Jeremy D. Williams. Jeremy was first elected to council in 2010. He was then elected mayor in 2014. During his 4 years as councillor, he oversaw community planning and development. He was a member of Dufferin County Council for 4 years as mayor of Orangeville. He also served on the Police Service Board, the Orangeville Hydro Board, and the other committees that he served on were Recreation Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, Heritage Orangeville, the Trailway Committee, and the First Night Committee. And we want to thank Jeremy for all of his time and energy that he put into his time, his 8 years as a council member here. Jeremy Williams, thank you. Now, I'm wondering if we could take just a couple minutes here, if those council members who are here tonight, Deputy Mayor and I would like to take a picture with you, if you wouldn't mind, in the atrium. And again, I want to thank you for coming tonight, and the whole town appreciates all of the years of service that you've given to our town. Thank you again. We're going to reconvene here. Thank you for your indulgence where we took a quick picture with our former council members. Moving on to 7.2, we have a delegation, Mr. Narendra Paul Singh. Mr. Singh.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Narendra Paul Singh, 14 Stewart Court, Orangeville. I am here on behalf of Orangeville Sikh Society. Sikhs are celebrating the birth of their beloved founder, Guru Nanak, by planting 1 million trees worldwide in 2019. Your Worship, Sandy Brown, Sikhs around the world are joining together to plant 1 million trees as a means of helping the planet and honoring the founder of their religion. The Million Tree Project is being orchestrated by the Washington, D.C.-based environmental group EcoSikh. Since the project was launched last month, thousands of saplings have been already planted across Australia, UK, Kenya, USA, India, and Canada. EcoSikh has worked on climate change issues with the UN, White House, and with other international environmental bodies. Sikh Environmental Day is being celebrated every year on March 14th since 2018 in USA. Sikh volunteers are working with environmental specialists in order to collectively plant 1,820 forests around the world. Each forest is said to contain several hundred shrubs and trees, all of which will be made up of species that are native to the area. Since majority of the Sikh population lives in Punjab, India, every single village in the Indian state has committed to planting their own forest of 550 trees. The Million Tree Project is expected to be finished in time for the 550th birthday of Sikhism founder Guru Nanak in November. Dr. Rajwant Singh, the president of EcoSikh, Guru Nanak was a nature lover. He talked about nature as manifestation of God, and many of his writings talked about how we need to learn lessons of life from nature. He now hopes that the project will inspire his fellow Sikhs to reconnect with the planet and motivate youngsters to get involved in protecting the planet. I, on behalf of Orangeville Sikh Society, request your worship and council members to allow us place where trees could be planted in our town for this historic occasion in special ceremony. Your assistance in this matter is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I'm going to pass this over to Councillor Peters for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, thank you very much for the presentation. A very worthwhile initiative worldwide with great environmental impact. I'd like to put a motion forward that this matter be moved to Sustainable Orangeville, the local committee that can then work with community services staff to find an appropriate location.
Okay, seconder, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, all in favor? Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh. Moving on, 7.3, we have a delegation from Dufferin County, Carissa Downey, and Mr. Darrell Keeney.
Thank you for the opportunity and congratulations on your council chambers.
Yes, it's great.
You have AV equipment that works and everything.
Yes.
The county councilors on the group will understand what I mean by that.
Do I need to do anything here to get this rolling, or is that all you guys? Is this...
You know which one's yours?
Yep, that one right there. Perfect. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. You guys are the last stop on our municipal council roadshow, so to speak. We gave this presentation initially back at County Council in March, or a similar variation of it. We have been working on a sign plan, so to speak. We've worked with Central Counties Tourism to determine a set of destinations within the county, and from there have kind of put together a plan of how we're going to implement signage throughout the county. So we wanted to make sure that you in Orangeville were informed of what was happening as well. We are very aware that Orangeville has already implemented a sign strategy in the past, and a very thorough and great one. So by no means do we have any intentions of taking away from all of that hard work that was done, but instead complementing it and just trying to create some consistency throughout the county as far as signs go. So the first sign that you'll see on your screen there is our large county gateway sign. So these signs we will be installing at our major county entranceways. You'll see the nice curved top to the sign there that kind of echoes the way that the logo and the Dufferin County are imprinted on the sign. We then have the reflection of the logo on the right-hand side done in this kind of nice gray-brown contemporary feel. The logo along with the lettering have the opportunity to actually be backlit. So the sign would then be visible in the evening. Therefore, the letters would also stand out from the sign, giving it a bit of a three-dimensional look. This bar that you see across the bottom of the sign as well, we also have the opportunity to make it into an LED light. So again, visible in the evening. And we've implemented this strip across the bottom of the sign to showcase the municipality that travelers are entering as well. We thought that was important, and actually that idea came from Eastcare Fraxa, who thought that it'd be great to implement them, which is why they're kind of the example that was used to see how it would look from the get-go. The designer also suggested that we implement some shrubbery and landscaping around the sign just to make sure that it's not a standalone fixture. Thankfully, the majority of our entranceways throughout the county already have a lot of natural landscaping there, so we won't have to do too much aside from some small shrubbery. And in addition, the designer suggested having some spotlights on the signs as well, again, just to ensure that they are illuminated in the evening. So this is the one sign that we are proposing to install that would kind of have an impact on Orangeville. I apologize, I should have included the location in the presentation, but we're proposing to put it at the corner of Dufferin County Road 109 and Dufferin County Road 23. There aren't any Orangeville gateway signs out there at this time, and when you're coming around the curve, there's a nice big plot of land there on the right-hand side that we're thinking might make a good location for a sign. We have some work to do there because it will be, as you know, in Peel. But we're hoping that we're able to work something out with those folks to be able to implement some county gateway there. For transparency reasons, and just so you are aware of everything else that's kind of going on in the county, this is our kind of our secondary county gateway version. So we'll be installing these on any county gateways that have lower transportation or traffic numbers rather. So similar design right down to the reflection in the background. And we've included that band on the bottom as well that lets people know what municipality they're entering. So our first presentation was in Eastcare Fraxa, and they, with their OMAFRA downtown funding, actually wanted to do gateway signs with their money. And upon doing this presentation, they said, well, this is great, we'll just use these signs as our gateway signs, and then the look and the feel is consistent across the board. We thought it was a great idea, and we took it back to Public Works, and they said, great idea, the only problem is people are going to think they're entering the county from everywhere, when even if you're just entering it from, say, going from Grand Valley to Eastcare Fraxa, for example, you're not re-entering the county, which then came this design, putting the municipality's name first and foremost, with the Dufferin County branding on the top there. So this sign will be implemented by our rural municipalities, and the county will be paying for these signs, just so that we're transparent. That offer is, of course, on the table for Orangeville as well, but by all means, we know that you already have some wonderful and beautiful signs already installed, but we wanted to be transparent and make sure that that message was across the board. The next phase of the project will be to install some directional signs. So earlier I talked about how we collected a list of county assets. We will then be installing county directional signs that will list all of our municipal assets on them throughout the county. These signs, we've maintained the same design with the assets listed in the middle there, and then the county branding on top to again create that consistency right across the board. This slide just kind of shows the three signs together again, so just how you can see how the three designs work together. And the final step to the project will be updating what we call at the county our advertising signs. It's our local version of the TODS program. So you'll see on the left-hand side there, maintaining that branding. Along the left-hand side, we have the TODS logos, so it kind of gives a nice visual to the assets that people might be looking for. And on the right-hand side, the directional logos along with the number of kilometers they have until they reach their destination. On the right-hand side, still an advertising sign, just a different version, with the branding on top, the directional arrows and kilometric values moved to the left-hand side, and the logos removed. So that's all for us. We just wanted to come and make sure that the town of Orangeville was aware of the signs that we hope to install. And thank you for your time.
Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and truly impressive graphic design work and consistency across the board. I noticed that one of my colleagues here at the council table ended up, his eyes lit up when, of course, the Todd signs came up, but that's not the humorous piece to the question. When you see an opportunity for an advertiser, are you going to be charging advertising for, or at least an advertising rate for the business to place their business on those signs?
We will be. So it'll be in a similar format as it is presently. I believe our present rate is $70 a year for our Todd signs. So this will just be an updated version. The idea through the Todd's program is that the business owner essentially pays, so the program pays for itself, just so it's not costing the county any money to facilitate it.
Are you also working with MTO to get approvals on locations? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I also think the signs look great. This is perhaps a bit of a small potatoes type comment, but given that you may have some lighting integrated and that these signs will likely be in more natural areas, I would discourage the uplighting component just to keep those areas as undisturbed as possible from light pollution. So I'm take it or leave it, but I think you can get still a nice vibrant look out of it with the internal lighting and perhaps save the expense on the distribution of light in that regard.
Any other comments, councillors? Questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. Okay. Moving on to item 7.4, we have Ashley Hamilton and John Sandler from Baseload Power. Maybe just Ashley Hamilton. Okay. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. I might need a hand with getting out of this if that's possible. Oh, maybe not. We are. Is there a way to? Sorry.
There we go.
This chair makes me feel exceptionally short. Thank you, sir. So good evening, and thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having me here tonight. I'm here on behalf of Baseload Power. We are a privately owned, Ontario-based infrastructure and energy solutions provider. Our principals have over 20 years of experience and are responsible for over 600 megawatts of energy projects that are currently in operation. And we are working with a number of municipalities and private site owners on our current endeavor to install, own, and operate electric vehicle charging stations in the region. In short, our proposal is to acquire access to a parking spot on town property where we would cover any and all costs to install, operate, and maintain a level 3 charging station for electric vehicles. And we will in turn pay your town a portion of the revenue, essentially as rent for that parking spot. We believe it demonstrates a green commitment in your community, and the charger that we'd be using, a level 3, is an 18 to 25 minute charge, so it's a big step up from the level 2s, which are currently more common. And for this reason, it can be used by multiple drivers throughout the day as opposed to 1 or 2 if it was a 4 to 8 hour charge for a level 2. And in order to make this proposal financially viable, we're applying to NRCan for funding under an RFP that ends on May 16th, which I realize is Thursday, which is why I'm here today. But a bit more about our product before we get to that. It is a universal plug, so it can be used from anything from a Tesla to a Leaf to a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And it is cellular connection built into it, so people can book it ahead of time. They can find it on their phones, they can find it on their computer, they can see if it's in use. when they're coming through the area. And we're asking for year-round accessibility, so a site where it can be used all year round, which is one of the NRCan requirements. And it'll be provided at market rate. So right now it's $20 per hour billed to the second. So it takes 18 minutes to charge in the summer, 25 in the winter. It's about a $6 to $7 charge for a car. Our process is we're hoping to obtain council approval to move forward with a memorandum of understanding to apply for NRCan funding. After which, or concurrently, we would look to confirm a location. We've worked with staff a bit and identified 200 Lakeview Court as a possibility, and we have confirmed that there is capacity there for us to connect. And after that, we would apply for the funding on Thursday and install an electric vehicle station within 18 months of approval. And a little bit about the memorandum of understanding that we are asking for. It's a minimum requirement for our NRCan application, and it is an agreement to negotiate a lease in good faith, but we would be coming back to council to get further approval on that lease. This isn't the end of the negotiations or the approvals. A few of the terms are we will decommission and restore the site at our sole cost at the end of the term. We are responsible for any and all costs, including snow clearing, electricity usage charges through a separate meter. We're responsible for all insurance and provide you a full indemnity. And any signage obviously would be subject to municipal approval as well. And I guess the one point that's not in here is it's a minimum of a 10-year commitment for NRCan. And that's about it.
Okay. Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much through you, Your Worship. Ms. Hamilton, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm a huge proponent for this. Some of my colleagues on council know that I'm a car nut and really a firm believer in, of course, electric vehicles. I wish they could end up having one that's cost-effective and was a truck. It would be really nice for me. But having said that, I think that there's some points here that I just wanted some clarification on, and I think for those that may be watching, those that are in the audience, and those that are on council, I think that the MOU is one of those opportunities for us to enter into, obviously, some dialogue. You have a pressing timeline here of May 16th to at least get your application in, and crossing our fingers that we would certainly get the support. Looking at a 10-year agreement, I think that that's something that would obviously come back at some point once further negotiation is required. But I did have some questions regarding the payback and, the opportunity for us to certainly generate some revenue. And I don't know if now would be the opportunity to pose that question to you, because I have several questions, and I know some of my colleagues here on council probably have some very similar ones too as well. No doubt the location that you've chosen is a high-traffic corridor. It's one that a level 3 charger would make a lot of sense. Knowing several colleagues of mine who have electric vehicles who in fact commute back and forth in the city, one of the encumbrances is obviously being able to have your vehicle charged in a very short period of time. We would love people to stay here, and that's why we have level 2 chargers just outside of Town Hall across the road. Enables people to spend approximately 2 to 4 hours doing some shopping and other investigation of the community. But the payback is one that I was curious on, because again, there was some wording in your presentation, and it was an opportunity for us to end up highlighting some payback or part of the agreement. So if I'm correct in saying so, that if the generation of approximately $200,000 per year was made from that location, the town would end up receiving approximately $6,000 in a lease agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, so the numbers in the MOU are not per year, it's in the lifetime of the charge.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get clarification. So if we're talking about a lifetime of 10 years, then we really end up prorating that to be approximately $600 per year.
So we're saying for the first $200,000 over the term of the entire 10 years, you'd get 3%, and then it goes up from there.
Yep.
And those terms are negotiable. The original 3% is basically until we recover our costs. It's difficult for us to pay more than that, but after that, it's more negotiable. But the initial $200,000 basically covers our costs
Your startup.
to do the installation and administration and the actual equipment costs and insurance and maintenance.
And looking at your utilization map, do you have other municipalities who have already agreed to this, are on board, and who would those be?
I had it in my phone just because I figured that would come up. We have ESSA has agreed. And with SEGA, it's been approved by a special committee. It's going back to council on the 22nd.
Okay.
So we're hoping to get a letter of intent essentially from them towards the MOU. Georgian Bluffs is the same. Oro Medonte has agreed, and Bradford West Willenbury. Innisfil is considering it. They actually are not, they don't want to bring it to council. They said this doesn't require council approval, so they're getting back to us separately. Kincardine is meeting today on the topic, and Grey Highlands is meeting on Thursday, or on Wednesday, sorry, on the topic. So we're hoping to hear back from them. And we're waiting to hear back from Collingwood as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Hamilton.
Well, I think that location on Lakeview Court, right off Highway 10, is a very convenient location for those traveling north from Toronto to our town. So I think that's a great location for this. And, you know, to make it convenient for people to stop in Orangeville is going to have a few more benefits maybe than just the money that we might make from the sale of electricity. So I'm certainly in favor of this type of initiative. I guess we need, oh, we've got Councillor Taylor jumping on board here. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you for your presentation as well. I guess the only thing that I wasn't understanding, I am the proud owner of a Beta VCR. I have an Atari 2600. I have, you know, numerous things that I should never have bought. And I guess when I look at it, I think about 10 years. And although the financials aren't huge for us by any stretch, by the time we get to year 3, will you refurbish the device and give us something that's useful as opposed to year 10, we're still stuck with year 1?
I mean, year 10, we would still be stuck with year 1 too, frankly, from a
Yeah.
revenue standpoint. So yes, our intention is to replace the equipment as it's required. And that's built into our pricing model.
Okay. Okay. Just don't want a big cellular phone, Mr. Mayor, you know, like something in a bag.
Big brick, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, fair comment. Yeah. Any other comments from councillors here? So I guess we need maybe a motion to move ahead with the memorandum of understanding. Councillor Post, would you like to make that motion, or you want to talk? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm happy to make the motion that's actually in the agenda to move forward with the memorandum of understanding.
Seconder, Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Okay, you got your go-ahead. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're moving into statutory public meeting. Deputy Mayor McIntosh is going to take the chair.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just to go over some of the ground rules that we'll be following tonight. Anybody who speaks and/or wants to be notified of further discussions on this topic, please complete the notification list on the table at the front. First, there'll be a presentation by town planning staff. Then there'll be comments by Alan Young on behalf of the applicants. Questions from council for town planning division staff or Alan Young will be next. And we invite questions and comments from the public regarding this application. So first of all, presentation by the town planning staff.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, residents in attendance, and those viewing from home. Tonight is a statutory public meeting to review and present a planning development application as submitted to the town for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of this meeting is to present the application and the development proposal to members of council and the public, to receive any comments that members of council or the public may have, and to answer any preliminary questions regarding the status of this application at this time and the process going forward. The applicant's planning consultant is also in attendance and will follow my presentation with one of their own, which will provide more detail concerning the particulars of the development proposal. The applicant has proposed the amendments to these town documents in order to expand an existing parking area located on 63 Broadway, which is located just to the south of these lands, onto lands currently occupied with a detached dwelling, municipally known as 2 3rd Street. The proposal is to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit a parking lot as an extension of an existing commercial use where the permitted land uses on the property are for residential uses only. Highlighted in red is the boundary of the property. It is rectangular shaped with approximately 0.048 hectares of lot area and 20 meters of frontage onto 3rd Street. The subject lands are also include a portion of a closed municipal laneway that are currently being used for parking in the existing restaurant at 63 Broadway. This aerial view provides a clearer look at the existing dwelling on the property, which is proposed for demolition. It also illustrates the extent of existing parking on the property used by the restaurant. The applicant intends to extend this parking area to the north into the lands currently known as 3rd Street. A portion of the existing parking that is currently being used at the restaurant will be lost to a proposed expansion and addition of the restaurant, and has prompted the applicant to seek out alternate parking options in the immediate vicinity. This slide provides photos of the existing dwelling that is proposed for demolition. The remainder of the site will be raised and graded to provide a level parking surface for future customers of the restaurant. A retaining wall is proposed for the lot boundary to the north, which is adjacent to another existing dwelling, and east, and a 3-meter landscape buffer will separate the raised grade from the adjacent dwelling. Access to the expanded parking area will continue to be 3rd Street, as is present. The next slide shows the proposed site plan. The red area delineates the proposed parking expansion area. A total of 15 new parking spaces are proposed and will replace parking that is currently located at the side, the west side, of the restaurant in the town boulevard, and additional parking that is to be removed at the rear of the restaurant to accommodate the proposed addition to the building. The site plan illustrates the expanded restaurant floor plan and the proposed use of the area at the west side of the restaurant as outdoor entertainment and dining area. The existing land use designation in the official plan for the subject lands is high-density residential, and it is illustrated here on the slide in orange. The official plan amendment application is seeking a redesignation of these lands from high-density residential to central business district to permit the proposed parking area on the property. The permitted uses of the current designation permit residential land uses, such as apartments, whereas the proposed central business district designation will permit a wide variety of commercial land uses. The subject lands are zoned multiple residential medium density zone in the town of Orangeville zoning bylaw. The current multiple residential medium density RM1 zone does not permit the proposed use. An amendment to the central business district zone would permit the expanded parking use by the restaurant, which is also a permitted use in the CBD zone. Planning Division staff have received several comments from external agencies. These comments have confirmed no concerns or comment with respect to the application. There have been minor comments received with respect to proposed site layout as it relates to zoning. A 3-meter landscape buffer needs to be included between the proposed parking area and the east lot line and 3rd Street. No other formal comments have been received from residents or property owners with respect to the application. Following the meeting tonight, Planning Division staff will consolidate any and all comments received and will continue review of the application toward the preparation and presentation of a report to council, which will include at that time a draft official plan amendment and amending zoning bylaw. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do questions after Mr. Young's presentation. If I could call up Mr. Young, welcome.
How do I advance one? I think my slide may be next. Is that right?
There's no more slides on here.
There.
This one here?
Yep, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of council, as stated by Mr. Dixon, what you have before you this evening are official plan and zoning amendment applications to allow the use of 2 3rd Street for a parking lot for the expanded restaurant at 63 Broadway, which will once again be called Greystones. Formerly separate properties, 2 3rd Street and 63 Broadway, those titles have merged. That is a single property at the present time. And the slide I have before you is a rendering of the project, which shows, in particular, the details of the addition. The boulevard parking there that you see there, if you could please ignore that because that is going to be removed. And there would be outdoor seating beside the building, between the building and 3rd Street, and landscaping. The expanded restaurant will contain a total of 198 seats in 5 different dining areas. The largest area, containing 64 seats, will be in the new addition. And the new addition will have a high ceiling. That isn't 2 stories, that's just 1 story. So that's where the largest dining area will be located. The second largest, with 60 seats, will be on the 2nd floor of the old building. And some of you may be familiar with the stairwell that comes up into the middle of that existing room on the 2nd floor. That will be eliminated, so there'll be a continuous dining room on the 2nd floor. In line with best practices for heritage conservation, the proposed addition does not mimic the old building. It is, however, complementary to the old building in terms of building height. The roof pitch is similar. The window details are vertical. The bays are spaced in a similar manner to the old building, and the windows will have glazing bars like the old building. The plan also maintains the entrance functions of the doors coming in off 3rd Street. So it's scaled appropriately, in our opinion, to look like an addition, which does not dominate the old building. The project was presented to Heritage Orangeville late last year, and they have advised that they have no concerns with the proposal. Now, I'm showing you the restaurant, the picture of the restaurant, to give you an idea of what's driving the request for the parking. The restaurant itself doesn't actually need a rezoning. And the required parking, the parking required by the zoning bylaw is provided on the lot 2 doors to the west, number 59 Broadway. That's an existing parking lot with 24 parking spaces, and which more than meets the parking required for the building, which is approximately 15 spaces. So notwithstanding that, additional parking is necessary for this facility from a business perspective to make up for the elimination of the existing parking behind the building and the boulevard parking, as mentioned by Mr. Dixon. And as I've mentioned, the boulevard parking area will be replaced with landscaping and outdoor seating, which will enhance the appearance of the project. The surface parking at the rear of the building will contain a total of 15 spaces, of which 12 would be within 2 3rd Street, the area that would be rezoned in this proposal. The proposed site plan provides 3 meters of landscaping along the 3rd Street lot line beside the parking. And as I've mentioned, in addition, the 3rd Street Boulevard will be landscaped. There will also be 3 meters of landscaping along the north lot line, adjacent to the house property at 4 3rd Street. And in addition, there is landscaping proposed along the east lot line, adjacent to the Sunbelt Rentals outdoor storage area. That's obviously a less sensitive area. We're actually proposing a slight reduction in the zoning requirement from 3 meters to 2.7 meters as a minimum for the landscaping in that area. That could be a site-specific exception in the zoning bylaw. Landscape details in terms of planting, shrubs, and trees will be addressed through the site plan approval process, and that application is underway at the present time. In our opinion, the proposal is highly supportable from a planning point of view because this parking lot will support a revitalized and enlarged restaurant anchor for the benefit of Orangeville's downtown. And it will achieve the ongoing conservation of one of the landmark buildings of the Downtown Heritage Conservation District. The setting of the building will be enhanced by the removal of the boulevard parking and its relocation to a landscape setting at 2 3rd Street, on a site which is already contemplated in the official plan for redevelopment, so that it isn't a stable, what's the east side of 3rd Street, south of First Ave, wouldn't be considered to be a stable residential area within the meaning of the official plan that is designated for change. We would ask that the staff report be received and that the applications be referred back to staff to bring back a report containing recommendations on the 2 applications and the residential demolition application at the earliest possible date. Be pleased to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any questions for Mr. Dixon or Mr. Young from council? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess it's more of a statement than anything, and that is I love that old building. I congratulate Mr. Huff and the rest of the group for investing in our town and investing in that building in particular. I guess, you know, I'm not someone who would invent the internet. I don't have creative bones in my body, but when I look at the addition, it's not visually stunning, and I don't know. I don't have an issue with what you put forward. I'll vote to approve, but it doesn't look like the old building to me, and it doesn't quite look like what I guess I was thinking we were going to be seeing. So it's just a personal taste, I guess, but as a councillor, I feel like I have a chance to offer it, and I will. I don't like the look.
Councillor Post.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if this needs to go through our town planning staff, but just a quick question. I noticed on the plan, and as the chair of the New Access Orangeville Committee, I see that there's only 1 accessible parking space allocated. And I just had a concern with that number, seeing as how we've got a seating for 198 people in the restaurant now. Through you to town planning staff, perhaps, what is the requirement through our bylaws currently for accessible parking spaces?
Through your official plan amendment, zoning amendment for just the 2 3rd Street. There is a current site plan application being reviewed currently by staff for the restaurant portion. A long answer to a short question, but thank you.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Young, I'm just reviewing this photo, and I tend to have the same sentiments as my fellow councillor Taylor with the most beautiful historical building downtown. I don't know if this addition really does look like it's giving the original building very much grace. If I look at this, is the addition completely flush with the existing building, or is it out a little bit more towards the road?
Councillor Sherwood, this is a slightly older elevation than the current proposal, and the front wall will be recessed. For the first part, the front wall will be recessed a little bit relative to the front wall of the old Greystones building, just because the lot line is on a bit of an angle there. But it definitely won't be projecting forward.
Okay, and then further, Mr. Chair, you mentioned that you had taken this to Heritage Orangeville. That new committee is being struck later on this week with new members on it. Did you present this floor plan to them, like this design?
The elevation? the, the rendering.
Yes.
I believe this was, I wasn't at that meeting, but I believe this was one of the graphics presented, yes.
Was this one of the ones that Heritage Committee? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Brown.
I was looking at the site plan, one of the early, during Mr. Dixon's presentation, and am I correct in that the lot immediately to the east on Broadway, that's going to be parking for the restaurant? Essentially between where Century 21 is and the restaurant?
Mr. Mayor, looking at the site plan, and you can see the outer boundaries, it's sort of L-shaped. Everything within that line is going to be merged on title. Right now, 2 3rd Street and 63 Broadway are merged.
Right.
And the other two properties, 61 and 59, 59 being where the parking lot is, will all be merged in as well.
Right.
And that's one reason how that parking lot is going to serve the zoning requirements for the number of spaces required for the restaurant.
Right. Is this going to cause any issues with that real estate office and parking? Because I think they use some of that lot currently, do they not?
Perhaps there is some informal use, but there's no entitlement to that use.
Right.
Through any agreement.
Okay. That's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and a question that would be posed to our planning department. But again, I just wanted to compliment, again, any investment in our community is positive investment, and do like the idea of an expansion. Looking at the site plan, I noticed the outdoor seating as an example, and my curiosity is out of, I guess, two things: safety, ambience, and that whole piece of having outdoor seating. I love, going to a restaurant, going to a place where you can certainly enjoy the weather and enjoy the camaraderie and the food and everything else. But based on the site plan, is there a specific setback for that kind of location? Because of it being a high-traffic area, Broadway and 3rd, I know a lot of traffic, heads north on 3rd. Is there a standard policy that exists within the planning department on how far that outdoor seating can be, and has that been taken into account?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Andrews. The very good question, and I should have maybe focused a little bit more on that in my presentation, except that it's really the matter of a current site plan application. That outdoor seating that you see on the site plan before you is subject to a future encroachment agreement. Those lands are, as you know, within a town boulevard on town land. So the town can and will impose and stipulate those details. Not to mention, the town can and will stipulate the use of those lands. What the site plan shows and what ultimately the final version is may be different, or those details certainly will be negotiated throughout the process of the site plan and the crafting of the encroachment agreement. Those details haven't been finalized. It is still an outstanding item that we're waiting for clarification on from the applicant. So to answer your question, setbacks, the nature of use, the hours and operations of those uses within those lands are at the discretion of the town and ultimately the encroachment agreement.
Mayor Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you to the investors who are bringing this project to our town. Orangeville's become the culinary center of Dufferin County, and more of Greystones is what we want, I think, and I'm certainly in favor of expanding what they've done there. And a comment on the rendering, I'm not quite sure what the surface is there, but if Heritage Orangeville has already vetted this, I'm prepared to accept their recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite questions or comments from the public regarding this application. Sir, please give us your name and address, please.
Thank you. Your Worship, members of council. My name is Mick Manuel. I'm the current homeowner and resident of 54 First Avenue. It's located directly across the road from the proposed development. I had kind of seen this for the first time tonight. I had been in touch with some members of Mr. Howe, but he never actually got back to me on what the design was to look like. I have a couple of concerns. Being the homeowner directly across, one of them is lighting. For me, is I'm a shift worker, and the proposal looks like it would, you know, create a lot more light pollution in the area, and the traffic. Currently, the residents of that laneway, Dairy Lane, as well as myself, we use that. I don't have a driveway, so I use the parkade located in the alley, and with the added. Sorry, you'll have to excuse me, I'm a little nervous. I didn't prepare, and I should have dressed up, I guess. So a little bit concerned about the added traffic, because Dairy Lane is the only access for myself and about 4 other residents on that street. And with the added parking and traffic, 3rd Street being very busy, it's my only access to that lane, so I'm kind of concerned about that. One of the other things with the outside seating that would concern me is that in festivities like the Jazz Festival or things like that, I had an agreement with the prior owners of Greystones, Tony and Annette Martin, where they were limited to glass service on the patio and that, due to the fact of litter and garbage that would end up mostly on my lawn during those kind of festivities. Trying to think of anything else. I have a couple of concerns based on that. I would invite any kind of guidance on that issue as to what I could be directed to do, I guess. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask for clarification. So this information hasn't been circulated to you?
Contacted Mr. Rodney Howe through email a couple of times, but had not received any kind of response. I had spoken with Mr. Dixon in the planning department, and he had shown me basically what he had presented here tonight based on the plans that he had received from the applicant. So yeah, and I've been a longtime homeowner there, and it's very busy in that area, and with the added light, all hours of the night and that, this may not be relevant, but my significant partner was rear-ended by someone who was employed by Greystones going to work just last year. So there's a lot of turning going on in that area. And the other thing too, like with the Crown, there's part of that is Crown land, and I worry about you know, pollution and that, and snow removal, and who's going to be responsible for that based on, because I'm in the area. Anyway, I have a few concerns.
So light pollution and just garbage in general in the area of concern?
Jazz Festival, like if there's outside seating, currently they play music when the restaurant was open, and in the prior owners of the restaurant, they had an agreement where there was only supposed to be acoustic music on the patio. So I worry about if they expand their seating, is it going to be a rock concert every night out there? Because I live directly across the road, and I have no foliage to kind of block that sound or light.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Huff will reach out to you. Mr. Huff is here, and
I don't know the procedure, guys. Sorry.
I know that they're certainly would be concerned about making sure that the residents in the area are not that there isn't a problem with noise, pollution, and such. So, yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public? Seeing none, we need a motion. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I heard it right. So if the renovations go through, you guys complete this unit, it's going to be called Greystones again? Did I hear that right?
Go ahead, Mr. Young.
I'll just make a couple of comments. I just wanted to point out the area being rezoned through these applications is just 2 3rd Street. And the The parking access that exists today is going to be in the same location in the future. And everything north of that access, across the full frontage of the lands being rezoned, is going to be landscape boulevard, like just grass. I just wanted to make sure the council understood that the boulevard patio area is going to be in the general area where it is today. That is south of that entrance driveway coming in from 3rd Street. And the other thing is that I expect the town will impose a condition, and my client would certainly accept it, that any lighting of the parking would be required to focus down into the parking lot and not to spill over onto adjacent lands.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just building on that comment, perhaps planning could speak to if there are any light pollution zoning regulations in town, or whether or not they'd be considered as part of the application, given the comments we've heard.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Peters, full cutoff lighting is a standard condition of all site plans. So we would, of course, include that as part of our draft site plan agreement in the future, as well as any other more specific, site-specific situations that have been discussed this evening. As we have already with a few neighbors in the area, those would be included in the encroachment agreement as well.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to receive this report, please? Mayor Brown makes the motion. Councillor Andrews seconds it. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. That ends our public meeting. Thank you.
Okay, moving along in our agenda. Number 9, we have no consent motions. Number 10, staff reports. We have a recommendation that report ISTD 2019-010 dated May 13th, 2019 regarding transit update be received, and the council directs staff in accordance with an implementation strategy as presented within this report. I understand that we have 2 parties that would like to speak to this, Ms. Bradley and Mr. Whitcomb. Ms. Bradley.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you tonight. It's probably not a surprise to anybody that I would be speaking on this item. I am one of the founders of the Community Garden, Orchard, and Food Bank, and I'm very passionate about that. This is our 7th year of operation, and I am very much opposed to having the bus transfer station located adjacent to the garden and orchard. This council has established the transit task force, and I would ask that prior to anything further being done on transit, that task force be given their opportunity to do their work, review the bus situation, and report to council. I would also ask that council take a look at potentially another transfer location. The consultant's report had recommended a Broadway location as its first, as a priority, but that was never brought to the previous council. The Idlebrook location was the only one that was brought. And if not there, then perhaps the train station or the fire station could potentially be another good site. We all know that the current fleet of buses are problematic. They're not on the road very often, according to my observations, and it might be an opportunity to cut your losses, get rid of the diesel buses, and convert it to electric. That way, we would definitely solve many problems in our community. Now, if the Idlebrook location is going to be considered, I would ask that we have the testing, the air testing, the emissions, and it to be done with the 4 idling buses, 5 to 10 minutes, whatever length of time they're going to be sitting there, in various conditions, windy days, rainy days, still days, etc. I just can't imagine being a gardener on your hands and knees, working on your plot, when the 4 buses arrive, spewing any pollutants onto the gardeners, as well onto their fruits and vegetables. Perception matters as much as facts, and the perception is not a good one. These are people that are growing organic vegetables and fruits for their families, and it's just not acceptable to have the fumes on them. The only solution would be to construct a barrier the length of the garden and maybe 8 feet tall plexiglass that would prevent the fumes from going into the garden area. As far as the faith in the test results, I don't know how many people would actually have any faith in them. We know that Volkswagen and other car manufacturers have lied to the public for years regarding their emissions. And the only safe diesel fuel fumes are no diesel fuel fumes. Another issue that we have at the garden are the bees. We have beehives between 5,000 and 8,000 bees, and the noise, vibration, fumes, as well as the additional people will stress the bees. They will either leave or they may become aggressive. The beehives would have to be moved. If we have no bees, we have no pollinators, and we have no food. So it's very important that the bees be able to pollinate the garden. Public consultation. There has been no public consultation on this whatsoever. When it was first brought to council, OSAT wasn't even consulted or even advised of this. So I think that's very important that the public gets an opportunity to speak on this. Now, the other idea is to move the garden. This garden was built, garden and orchard, was built on the backs of volunteers and donations with the assistance of Parks and Public Works. The central location is ideal because it meets the target segment that we're addressing, be it apartment buildings, multiple residences, etc. And it's right next to the social services hub. I'd like to know who's going to pay for that. And I estimate that it's probably going to be about $30,000 to relocate that garden. And you can't expect the volunteers to do it for free like they did the first time. And I really think it's disrespectful to even contemplate that. It really doesn't speak well to how much the town appreciates the work that volunteers have done. And the other locations are not ideal that have been recommended, and it will cost a lot of money to build them, build a new garden there. The Idlebrook lands were available to the town when it was being donated by the Idlebrook family, but Orangeville didn't have a need for it, but now they do. The old police station had no value and was pretty well given away to the door. That could have been a town location. And now we have the current fire station, which may have to be moved, and that too could be a valuable location for the bus transfer station. And I'm hoping that this council will continue with long-range planning so that we don't run into these things because there was a lack of long-range planning. So my ask is, please do not proceed with any plans until the transit task force has met and made recommendations. Consider a Broadway bus transfer location as being the perfect location. Consider electric buses. Conduct on-site emission tests in varying conditions. Conduct public consultation. Do not relocate the garden. Relocate the bus station instead. And finally, this is an award-winning garden. It's a jewel in our community. Please don't kill it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Speaker took some of my thoughts away from me there. We have this transit committee that we're organizing. Are we getting ahead of ourselves? Should we not put this on hold until the transit committee comes through with some of their recommendations? We're talking about everything from Uber to electric buses. I think it would be premature to go ahead with this particular item until that the study's been done from the committee. I'd like to see it put on hold. Thank you.
I know that the Broadway location, again, I haven't got all of the facts on it, Ms. Bradley, but anecdotally, I heard that the property owner on Broadway was starting to be initially cooperative, but pulled away on that Broadway location, being a private property owner, and if they're not willing to cooperate, the town can't impose anything on them. So that's my understanding. Again, this is anecdotal information. I don't have all the facts. As far as electric buses, I think that's a great idea. They're very expensive, but we did get some recent public transit funding that has come through. We're in the process of going through the grant application process. That's something that town council, town staff, and this transit task force are going to be looking at, I think. It certainly would solve the problem, and I'd like to see the town in general looking towards electric vehicles moving forward, not just for transit, but maybe for our own staff vehicles as well. And this is from a guy that drives an F-150, so embarrassingly, but at some point, I will make it happen. We will make that happen. In terms of emission testing, I would have to think there's probably copious amounts of testing that's already been done elsewhere. I would hope we could take some scientific facts that have already been on buses and such. I mean, as far as urban gardening is concerned, you either believe in it or you don't believe in it. I mean, we already asked town staff about the number of gasoline-powered vehicles that go by there, and it was in the order of 4,000 per day. There's urban gardening in every major city in the world, including Beijing and London and New York. So somewhere we're going to find a balance in this discussion. We don't want diesel fumes to be blowing onto food that's going to be eaten, obviously. But I would imagine that there's a lot of scientific data right now that we can probably call upon that other people have paid for. We can probably gather that information, I would hope. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a point of clarification, I believe the Broadway location Ms. Bradley was referring to was the First Street and Broadway location, not the Fresco location, which was a point I was going to bring up, because it would seem that the optimization study that was finalized in 2017, the top recommendation was that location on Broadway. It would be on town land. It would bring people right to the core in terms of shopping. There was some resistance regarding the parking issue downtown, but I see that as far more resolvable than a subpar location away from the core, and obviously with other conflicts such as the garden. So I agree with the Deputy Mayor. I'd like to see us have a firm decision based on all the facts and all the options, because it seems that a few of them never made the light of day. So I'd like to see us get to the right conclusion.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, former Councillor Bradley. I didn't get to, because I'm not the mayor or the deputy, I didn't get to publicly thank you for all of the work that you've done. And the very fact that you're back here and still doing community activist work is super impressive. So thank you very much. The train station location, I just want to cover that off. It is not convenient for what we're trying to accomplish. It's supposed to be running 4 routes in 4 circles. The train station is removed. So it wouldn't be something that I would support in terms of that. Moving the current buses to electric would be certainly something I would be interested in doing. What concerns me is, you know, the previous council, and I was on that transit committee, so I am part of this as well, but we all agreed that we would buy new buses, and those buses were $430,000 each. I'm not in favor of making any changes at this point to what we currently have. I mean, our resources are limited in terms of what we have. So at the end of the life of those vehicles, I certainly would be in favor of going to electric. And then I think back to our transit meetings, and I think back to that discussion about the downtown location, and I wanted to defer to Mr. Jones, but I believe it was the BIA who was not in favor, and we weren't able to go forward. And I'm not trying to incriminate anyone, it's just my understanding is we did follow through on that piece. We did our due diligence, and that is not an option. And by going back on it, we're going down the wrong path. And I apologize, I just don't remember why. And if it's okay, Your Worship, I'd like to come back after Mr. Jones speaks and continue with something else.
Mr. Jones.
On the topic.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor, he is ultimately correct. In some of the discussions around the council table during the previous term of council, and one of the times that we were discussing transit, the option was brought forward. I believe the member of council who sat on the BIA had indicated that it had been brought up at a BIA meeting, and they were very much not in favor because of the loss of parking spaces. To be clear, the location in question was on the north side of Broadway between First Street and John Street. The parking would be lost along there so that buses could use that as the transfer point. Certainly from a transit perspective, that is an excellent location right in the downtown core where there is a lot of destinations for people to use. However, as Councillor Taylor pointed out, the BIA was strongly opposed and the council of the day wasn't interested in pursuing it.
Your Worship.
Councillor Taylor.
Okay to continue. Mr. Jones, just further to the report that you've put forward here today, and excellently written, I just want to make sure I understand the three options, and I've just made some brief points to myself here to make sure I get this. So option one is, what you're suggesting is no transit station. We would abandon the work that we've already done on the past transit committee, which is 2016, and we would move on a new path. Option two would be continue on the path, abandon the Mayor Brown reco, which is to look into all these other options, but continue on the path of the 2016. And option three is continue the optimization study and pursue Mayor Brown's task force. Is that a good indicator?
Yeah, I think that's a good recap of it, yeah. But, yeah, Mr. Jones.
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, yeah, essentially that's it. Because there have been these two motions that have come forward, staff is seeking clarity from council as to specifically what their wishes are. And yes, we could, as we say, simply put everything on hold and do nothing until the task force has completed its work, put the task force aside and continue to implement the optimization study that was approved by the previous council, or recognize that perhaps the task force work is looking to the future and continue to work toward implementing the recommendations of the study that was completed earlier.
Correct. Mr. Whitcomb, would you like to add some thoughts, sir?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again on the issue of the potential impacts of diesel exhaust and diesel particulate exhausts on the community gardens. I don't have access to the transit report, and maybe I'm not looking in the right place, but I don't see it anywhere on the town's documentation. And I would love to read it. I was taken aback by the claim in the excerpt in this agenda that overall pollution levels do not impact urban gardening activities. Sorry, I'm Marblemouth. I spent about an hour looking through the two named sources, Urban Farmer and the British Public Health England. The only reference that I could find in Modern Farmer is a general article about testing for and dealing with contaminated soils in gardens. And it talks almost exclusively, in fact, really exclusively, with heavy metal pollutions, lead and chromium in particular. I saw no mention of diesel exhaust, nor of diesel particulate exhaust. I may not have been looking in the right spot. In Public Health England, I did find an updated version of what the Government of Canada research summary that I first quoted months ago. Diesel exhaust and diesel particulates are known causes of bladder cancer, lung cancer, and others. There continues to be no mention of research into the effect of diesel exhaust and diesel particulate exhausts on gardens. And I think that's where I'm really addressing your comments, Mr. Mayor, and that is there isn't that kind of research that's been done. It's been done on, as far as I can figure out, on a macro scale. It's been done on a detailed scale on particular occupations, miners, lorry drivers, truck drivers. But it's not been done on the scale of running buses and the exhaust on a nearby garden. And it's a matter not only of the diesel exhaust, it's also a matter of the diesel particulates. And they are the ones that seem to be the most deleterious in terms of lung cancer. So from my limited reading of it, we have evidence of the danger, clear evidence of the danger of exhausts from diesel engines, but we have no evidence of the effects of gardening, at least as far as I can find. So is it possible to use this lack of evidence to make a good decision? And in all of this, I should have been in front of Sylvia. I shouldn't have buried myself in the back, and I should have stood up and said, "Me first, please," because it's much more narrower than what Sylvia has talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we sit here with options, and Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the interest of getting something on the table and given my previous comments, I'd put forward the first motion, which is have it reviewed exclusively by the Transit Committee, giving the garden another growing season. And certainly we have a number of transit issues to discuss. This is only one of them, so I'd say let the task force work on it.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Andrews? I guess we'll call a vote on that, unless there's any further comment from councillors here. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Taylor is opposed. That motion passes. So we're going to put this onto the plate of a transit task force, and they'll be coming back to council with recommendations. Thank you. All right, moving along, we've got our next item is item 11. These are committee and board minutes. We have minutes of the Committee of Adjustment meeting on May 1st, minutes of the Orangeville Police Services Board meeting March 27th. We have minutes of the Orangeville Public Library Board meeting of March 20th. Recommendation that the minutes of these meetings be received. We want some commentary here from Mr. Andrews.
Thank you very much.
Vote on that. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a comment and a compliment to the Police Services Board for the detailed report. Nice to see the amount of information. Also wanted to make reference to one of the pieces that was also included in the council package that the general public may not be aware of, but I was very impressed by the Health IM report. And it primarily is, if I'm correct in saying so, is the information management of health-related and/or mental health-related issues that first responders, in particular OPS, may end up having to deal with. And so that information was very, very welcomed.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other further comments? We have a motion to receive these minutes. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. We have a number of pieces of correspondence now. I'm sorry? Question period. Of course. My apologies. Are there any questions that members of the gallery here would like to ask Town Council? Oops.
My name is Adam. I'm living in a group home from Community Living Dufferin. I have a concern with my street on Shirley Street. We're having a lot of water problems. We don't have any more hydro because we're not have enough hydro in our place. We also are looking forward a new place somehow in the future, and I hope this will come forward to the Town Council.
So Adam, just to clarify your concern, where you're living right now, you don't have, right, and you don't have enough water in that facility? Can you be more specific on that?
We're finding out that our drains has been disgusting, dirty, and it's not environment health.
Okay. Adam, who runs that facility? Is it Community Living Dufferin or?
Community Living Dufferin with Lisa Post and Amy McIntosh.
Okay. Okay. On the board.
On the board.
Mm-hmm. All right. Deputy Mayor McIntosh or Councillor Post, do you know about this issue at all? Deputy Mayor.
Just for the record, we weren't aware of that. We recently had a meeting and it was never brought up, but certainly I will pass it on to the head of Community Living Dufferin to see what they can do about it, Adam.
Adam, one more thing. You mentioned hydro as well, electricity.
Yes.
You have a problem with electricity as well?
Yes, we're finding that the cords in the basement are coming apart.
Okay. Well, thank you for your coming to us with that concern, and Deputy Mayor McIntosh and Councillor Post will definitely follow up. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the gallery? Seeing none, we'll move along to correspondence. So we have correspondence from the Township of Amaranth and from the Township of East Garifraxa regarding fire response calls. Any comment from council on these issues? Okay, Councillor Peters.
So are you just looking for those two items, or?
Yeah, I was going to kind of
okay.
down, but I know that this is something that's going to be discussed tomorrow in a fire service advisory meeting where the mayor and CEO, I believe, of East Garifraxa, Amaranth, and Mono are going to be meeting with Orangeville Fire, CEO Ed Brennan, and myself to discuss concerns that they have on billing. So there'll be more to share in our next council meeting regarding tomorrow's meeting with the Fire Service Advisory Committee. Okay, now moving on to 13.3, Town of Mono, Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund correspondence. We have correspondence 13.4, parking issues on Burbank. Okay, let's have Councillor McIntosh, or sorry, Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do find this interesting. It brings back memories. Not recently, a few years ago, I did ask Council of the Day to ban parking on one side of the street on basically all streets in town, and it got turned down. Hopefully we can get something out there this time. It's a shame because if you read the letters that came by, it talks about Carlton Drive. There was parking on both sides in the day, and we had a large fire on that street, and the fire trucks could not get down. Well, guess what? Council banned parking on one side of the street after that. I just don't want to see that happen again and then react to it. I'd like to be proactive. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment was on this issue as well, and I was actually going to address it through you to Mr. Jones. In the report, there was talk about a survey done previously on Carlton, and I was just wondering if that was an appropriate measure for this street as well, or perhaps building on the Deputy Mayor's idea, whether or not a staff report on all streets within the town that have parking on both sides be brought forth, if that's what Council's looking for.
Mr. Jones.
Through your worship to Councillor Peters, certainly the two approaches are to do it one street at a time, or to look at more holistically. Certainly, as the Deputy Mayor states, this has been an issue that staff have been aware of for quite some time. As noted in the memo, in 1997, our development standard changed, whereby new subdivisions that were being constructed, the local roads were only going to allow parking on one side of the road for the very reasons that the Deputy Mayor noted. Certainly there's plenty of roads that were built prior to 1997 where the legacy was parking on both sides of the road. Residents have become accustomed to that level of service, and presumably previous councils were reluctant to look into those changes. If this is something that council is looking for holistically, I would suggest it would be appropriate to make a motion asking staff to look at the issue and perhaps bring back some options for next steps.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I would be certainly willing to put that motion forward. I thank Mr. Jones for the holistic view on this, and I truly support both the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Peters. You know, as we take a look at some of those neighborhoods, I happen to be in one of those neighborhoods that in fact has matured prior to 1997's implementation. And I think that, you know, we're at a time in society where we have many households who are in fact, you know, more than one vehicle. And because of that, in some cases, 2, 3, 4 vehicles may be in the household. And because of that, we are getting some congestion on some of the roads. And heaven forbid we have another situation where you have an emergency services vehicle that can't go down that road. We also have other, you know, things that have changed in our society. You take a look at the example of online shopping, and this is not to isolate the fact that we have a lot of courier companies, but those vehicles happen to be quite large. And, you know, my other concern is safety of our children in our neighborhoods. And I really, as I've mentioned, I put forth this motion to have staff come back with maybe a holistic view, looking at all the neighborhoods to see how and what the effect and or the consequences would be to having parking only on one side of the roads or the streets.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I think you and I are aligned on the issue. I did want to bring up, I've had residents contact me from Benjamin Crescent and from Abbey speaking about the same thing, and it is an issue. I think the Deputy Mayor is absolutely right. My concern is, you know, I do think we should have staff look into it, and I'll be supportive of that motion, but when we do this, one of the side effects of what this will do is the parking on one side will, like, it's going to create issues, right? So we're going to fix something and we're going to create something else. And so I would just like to call out, and I don't mean to make our mayor uncomfortable, I had a side conversation with him privately, and we were talking about some unique ideas that he had to mitigate this. And I think innovative ideas, and I certainly don't want to steal the thunder, but innovative ideas like the mayor has would certainly help us as we progress. And I don't know if you want to divulge, or it's something we deal with staff at a later date, but I think these are the kind of things we need to pursue. So I'd be happy to second the motion, and I'll certainly be voting in favor of it.
Yeah, I attended a Economic Development Council of Ontario meeting in Collingwood on Thursday, and one of the speakers was from the town of Innisfil, who has, amongst other things, moved into public transit through partnership with Uber. But one of the other interesting things that they had was a problem with parking congestion at a beach on Lake Simcoe, which is part of Innisfil. The resolution to this parking problem at the beach was to involve local residents. And there's an app called Rover, and it's a parking app. It's used in many cities. And what you do is if you've got a parking spot in a surplus parking spot on your property, you put that up onto the app, and somebody who wants to use that parking spot then can book the parking space. So I think it's something that maybe we should add into this motion for town staff to look into. But I've always thought that there's probably some people that have an excess parking spot in town, and if they'd like to earn a little bit extra money, that they might offer one parking spot up to somebody and it would help relieve some of our parking issues in some of our congested streets. And Burbank is certainly one of the most congested because of basement apartments and such that are on that street. And we need some innovative solutions, and maybe this is one of them that we can add into a report for town staff to come back to us with. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Jones again, if you don't mind. You spoke about the change in development standard in 1997. Are the road width allowances the same between those two periods, or were they intentionally larger to account for two-sided parking?
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, the standard is essentially the same as it was pre-1997, but some of the much older roads in town are actually quite a bit narrower. There are some roads in town where parking's allowed on one side of the street, but that even makes it difficult to have two-way traffic. I'm thinking of Amanda Street in particular, as one that I drive on periodically. So certainly as you get much older streets in town, the traveled width of the roads can be quite variable, and it can be a bit of a challenge.
If I may, just as a follow-up, and not to add too much to this motion, but perhaps that width of various roads should be in account when we look at the parking issue. If there are roads that are too thin, I mean, let's look at this thing all at once if we can, and not just make one sweeping statement for all roads. If we know the allowances and a bit about the patterns there, perhaps there's more recommendations that would come out of that.
Okay, so we have a motion by, who was it now? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Taylor, and with a friendly amendment to add in a look at the Rover parking app as perhaps a way to help alleviate some parking issues in town. Let's have a vote. Are we all in favor? Opposed? No. Okay, so we'll look forward to a report back from Town Council regarding parking. But we need a motion to receive the correspondence. Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Moving on to item 14.1. This is information items. Commute Ontario update, a heritage permit application for employment services at 210 Broadway, another heritage permit application for the Seven Crowns Tattoo in Citrus City, 155 Broadway, another heritage permit application for Mortgage Architects at 94 Broadway. Any comment from council? We have a motion to receive these reports. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Passes unanimously. We have some notices of motion given prior to the meeting. 15.1, Councillor Taylor. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship. Technical difficulties. I guess for me, my fear was, as we've gone through these proposed funding changes, that our town is going to be impacted by this. So there was some initiatives taken forward in the last meeting by the town of Mimico that they were pursuing some different options. So I don't know, do you want me to read this, Your Worship, or would we just?
I guess we're looking for a motion to support this. Is that what you're after?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Taylor is making a motion to prepare correspondence to circulate to the Premier, Ministers of Finance, of Municipal Affairs and Housing and our local MPP. Seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? That passes unanimously. 15.2, we have a notice of motion from Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Well, I'm going to read mine.
Okay. And this is regarding OPP costing consultant.
Yes, that the Chief Administrative Officer be advised to issue a request for proposals or quotes to invite submissions from expert consultants to analyze the cost and services outlined in the Ontario Provincial Police Costing Proposal, and the cost and services currently provided by the Orangeville Police Services, and that the analysis includes service levels, costs of service, the cost of any enhancements required from the Ontario Provincial Police to equate to service currently provided by the Orangeville Police Service, and any other criteria necessary to effectively evaluate the cost of policing in the town of Orangeville, and that the consultant's report be submitted at a public meeting of council. And if I could just add to that, I would just like to stress that a consultant is not making this important decision for us. This is a decision of council as a whole. We will be making the decision, not the consultant. That is what we've been elected to do. None of us are experts in policing. A consultant will advise us on issues and add clarification on others. I have every confidence in this council, whatever the decision, we will get it right. This decision will not be based on politics or emotion. It will be based on facts. Thank you.
Okay, comments from council. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for putting the motion together. At this point, I certainly support the RFP process and understanding what a consultant may have to offer, but I don't pretend to have made up my mind on whether or not engaging that firm is the right move. So at this point, this is just more information, very limited staff time, ideally, for the preparation of this document, and we'll take it from there.
Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Peters beat me to it. I'm worried about, as we go through, for me, what I want to have is the facts. I want to be able to compare the facts. I will vote in favor of this, but at the same time, when we do get the RFPs back, I will reserve right to not vote in favor of it. And through you, Your Worship, to, I guess, Mr. Brennan, if you could just let the public know kind of an idea of what you think this might cost. I think the public should know that tonight about what we're potentially looking at as a cost.
Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you, I would predict that we're probably in the ballpark of $65,000, $75,000.
Okay. Any further comments from councillors? So this motion is to provide staff with the authority to move ahead with an RFP to provide proposals to the town for an OPP-OPS consultation. Seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Are there any? Okay, we have notices of motion at meeting. Triplicate, it looks like. Councillor Post.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will send this out by email to all of council and to Ms. Lankheit as well. Whereas it is important for the town of Orangeville to display leadership on matters related to gender parity, racial, cultural, and LGBTQ issues and ideas, and any other matters related to equity, inclusion, and diversity. And whereas the proposed Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan calls for the development of a diversity and inclusion plan, therefore, be it resolved that council approve the creation of a diversity and inclusion committee to provide consultation, advice, report findings, and make recommendations to council on matters and items related to diversity, inclusivity, and equity. That the diversity and inclusion committee be composed of, and right now I've got it as like X number of members of council and X number of members of public, reporting a broad range within the community, including representatives from diverse groups, national origin, ethnicity, language, race, color, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, and et cetera, and that staff be directed to report to council with the recommended terms of reference and membership for a diversity and inclusion committee.
Okay. let's go, so that is a notice of motion in meeting. That'll be dealt with at our next meeting. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have it cleverly worded like Councillor Post, but there's been a lot of discussion about Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choices Act, and it's sort of an omnibus bill that covers a variety of hot topics, including conservation authorities, the OMB, endangered species, heritage, et cetera. So there's a lot of municipalities that put forth motions that I'll be drawing on because I believe there's some changes in that bill that need to be spoken up about. The consultation, I believe, extends until June 1st, which would give us enough time to get that written and into the appropriate hands and ministers and whatnot by the next meeting. So you'll see that next time.
Thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm going to be making a notice of motion just to get it on the table right now. I have a considerable amount of wording in my motion that I need clarification from with the clerk. Basically, I am going to be putting a notice of motion for the Orangeville Town Council to request Dufferin County Council to consider opting out of the vacancy tax rebate program. And since my my motion I have written has some stats that staff needs to clarify, you'll see that on the next agenda.
Okay. So can you just clarify for the public what that means and where these vacancies are and what happens in the tax department?
Well, under Section 364 of the Municipal Act, we used to have to provide a 30% tax rebate to any vacant commercial and industrial properties that made applications. In 1 year, we received about 31 applicants, and 25 of those have been consistently applying year after year. So my concern is that by us granting and providing them the rebates, we're kind of encouraging them to keep their businesses vacant. And in my particular, I think that we need to encourage them to get the use of the properties that will benefit the community. So basically what's happened is the provincial government came back with a bit of a leniency and says, okay, before now you had to give those back, and now there's flexibility that we can opt out or reduce the rebate amount. And it has to be rubber stamped by Dufferin County.
Okay, thank you. Any other notices of motion at meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on. Any unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm not sure if this falls under new business or other business, but happened to be part of a report that Council was privileged to from the AMO, and this would be, again, possibly information that we could have reported on, or at least even casually provided back to members of Council. But this was Schedule number 9 in a AMO news release, and it identified the amendments to the LPAT, the Tribunal Act, and I'm not sure if this would go to Mr. Jones, but as per changes in Bill 107, I'm wondering if our planning department has any comments based on this May 7th announcement, which made some modifications or at least identified some things that we may not be able to process as we normally had been in the past.
Mr. Jones?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Andrews, I will be deferring this to Mr. Ward in a moment. However, I believe that a lot of the changes to the LPAT tie in with what Councillor Peters was discussing before with some of the stuff that's come out in Bill 108.
Yep.
And it may be more appropriate to defer this till the next meeting when it can be discussed in its totality, but I would defer it to Mr. Ward. If
Mr. Ward?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, just to further what Mr. Jones had said, it is something that's just been newly released by the province. It's something that staff are still looking at, trying to sift through and understand the changes and the implications for the town, and we hope to be able to report back to council on that in the very near future.
Great.
Thank you very much. I know that having to digest some of this information is very important, and I appreciate your candidness, and we'll look forward to getting some additional information, hopefully at one of our future council meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Post.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share for the information of the public and for council, our new Access Orangeville committee, which focuses on accessibility issues as well as age-friendly issues, has had our first meeting. We have a fantastic committee full of passionate people, and I'm excited to carry on the work. At our first meeting, we did discuss that the Accessibility Week is actually coming up even before our next council meeting. It starts on May 27th and runs through June 3rd. So at our first committee meeting, we decided as a committee to use some of our budget to sponsor a couple of public swims, which will be sponsored by the Access Orangeville and Seniors Committee. So I just wanted to share with everybody what those dates would be. So Sunday, May 26th, from 12:30 till 2 at Alder. We will have the leisure pool and the slide from 12:30 to 1:30, and both pools and the slide from 1:30 to 2:30. And then on Friday, May 31st, from 11 till 1, so we will have the leisure pool booked for that one. During that swim, we typically get some individuals that require some support because of their special needs, so we're excited to offer that up for the citizens of the community.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. And one other piece, I'd like to congratulate the members of the library board, and also through Mr. Osman, the Orangeville Public Library held their Battle of the Books, and congratulate all of the students that ended up persevering and reading, 25, 50 books over a period of time. But it was really wonderful to see Councillor Post and other members of the library board that were there. It was really an exciting time to see the competition, but also the literacy that was in fact read over a period of time, and the intelligence of many of these young people. It's nice to see that some of them were not necessarily going to their tablets, but in fact using I guess a non-electronic tablet to be enriched.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 19. This is bylaws listed below. Be read a first, second, and third time. Finally passed, numbered sequentially, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign them. First is a bylaw to authorize the extension of an agreement with the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Orangeville and District Branch, for the provision of animal control services and for the lease of the town-owned property at 650 Riddell Road for use as an animal shelter, and a confirming bylaw for the proceedings of council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville, its regular and closed council meetings held on April 29th. Councillor Peters recommended, and Councillor Post, all in favor? Receiving those recommendations, thank you. And may have a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.